Welcome, everybody, and thank you all for coming. This is one of our very special events to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Penn Institute for Urban Research. And we're extremely happy here to welcome the mother of the Institute for Urban Research, Judith Rodin, who created us in 2004, 2005. So thank you for being here, Judith. But what we are here today is to celebrate one of the initiatives that Penn IUR has been engaged in, which is a very, very fruitful and wonderful partnership with Penn Press. When we started the Institute, a series called The City and the 21st Century. And this series was envisioned to be quite broad, and it was to have different kinds of collections of books in it, one of which was the regular monographs that scholars would write. Another group were collected essays on particular things that were happening, but then another was dissertations that were turned into books by our students and other students. And then something that was very unusual for a press, a university press, was to ask people who had been in leadership positions in urban places to reflect on the experiences that they had and share those experiences in monographs that would help future urban leaders understand what they needed to do or how they could model their lives in what they were doing in the future. And so today, we are celebrating that particular section of books with 4 authors who are here to discuss this work. Mary Francis, who is the editor-in-chief of Penn Press, will say a few words. Mary?
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Mary Francis. I'm the director of the University of Pennsylvania Press, and I'm here to celebrate on 20 years of this remarkable partnership with the IUR. The influence of these books, more than 50 in 20 years, which is a marvelous record, is international and powerful. You look at the books and read them, you can see for yourself this is a truly global intellectual effort. I checked, and as far as I can tell, Antarctica is the only continent that isn't covered. There are authors from all over the world, and the energy of these books is truly something special. Jeannie mentioned the scholarship, of course, that sometimes is coming from early career folks. But as we're here to celebrate today, one of the truly valuable things is a partnership that captures what practitioners have learned, what they know, their wisdom about the reality of the city in the 21st century, which is such a complex and engaging topic. I mean, looking at all the books, which of course I encourage you to do, the range of energy that is coming out of the IUR and the range of issues that get talked about, the stuff that you would anticipate. We're talking about cities, so there's going to be planning, there's going to be politics, there's going to be design, there's going to be, demographics. But there's so many other things that come into it, and this series has covered everything, finance, health, climate, transit, the arts even. There's a book on New Orleans that has a contribution from ooh, two. I'm gonna let the sound guy figure that out. Is there just one of me now? Awesome. Okay. Anyway, I was just getting so enthusiastic. And I'm going to turn over the talking stick to my colleague, Bob Lockhart, who is the senior editor who's worked on this series and has worked with many of these amazing authors over the years, because he's got the real hands-on knowledge, particularly of these featured speakers, including our guest, Enrique Peñalosa. And I will just say that one of the things that I am most enthusiastic about, besides just promoting the marvelous partnership that we've had with IUR now for 2 decades, is hearing from these reflective practitioners who, of course, have such an incredible range of experience. And I am, as the owner of 3 bicycles, 2 SEPTA cards, and 0 cars, I am particularly excited to hear from our featured guest, Enrique Peñalosa, later on. But for now, Bob Lockhart.
Thanks, Mary. Bob Lockhart, senior editor at the Penn Press. And my job today is to introduce Enrique Peñalosa. But first, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that all of the books that you can see in the back, which, as Mary noted, number more than 50, are really, because of Jeannie and Susan's commitment, engagement, and wherewithal. It's just been such a privilege to work with them. They understand all facets of what it takes to create a book. The intellectual engagement, the practical issues, and the marketing, which is always helpful. So thank you. And everyone at the press appreciates your support and continued work on the series. So I actually had the pleasure of serving as Enrique's editor on his book, and we'll introduce him with a professional statement, although I feel like there are many things I could say in a more personal way, which maybe we'll get into later. But Enrique Peñalosa is an internationally respected urban thinker who, as mayor of Bogotá, profoundly transformed his city into an international model, especially in the area of public transportation and public space. In addition to dozens of schools, libraries, and cultural centers, Peñalosa, as mayor, spearheaded the creation of Transmilenio, perhaps his marquee accomplishment, an innovative bus-based mass transit system, as well as extensive bicycle network and more than 100 kilometers of greenways. He also oversaw the creation of hundreds of public parks, which, if you take a look at the book, there's one on the cover that has an interesting story, which hopefully we might talk about a little bit. In any case, hundreds of public parks, as well as a radical redevelopment of 33 hectares in the center of Bogotá, previously under criminal control. In addition to being a fellow here at Penn IUR, Peñalosa is a member of the advisory board of the African Mayoral Leadership Initiative, which advises African mayors and governors on leadership aspects. For over a decade, he was president of the board of New York's Institute for Transportation and Development Policy and has been a member of the London School of Economics Cities Program Advisory Board, as well as New York's Commission for the Reinvention of Transport. Peñalosa has been named many times in Planetazin's list of the most influential urbanists, past and present, and was also selected as one of the 15 thought leaders in sustainable city development by Identity Review in 2023. He's been awarded many important international recognitions, such as the Stockholm Challenge, the Gothenburg Sustainability Prize, and perhaps close to the heart of many here today, the 2018 Edmund N. Bacon Award from the Center for Architecture and Design here in Philadelphia. Last year, Peñalosa published what I think I will call his magnum opus, titled Equality in the City, Urban Innovations for All Citizens, for which as I mentioned, I had the great pleasure of serving as his editor. I would say that I would call it a visionary book, in the sense that Enrique not only discusses his policy ideas and his experiences as a practitioner of urbanism in the kind of bare-knuckle arena of municipal politics, but digs deeper into the underlying principles and beliefs that have guided him over the years. Enrique, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. It's an enormous honor to have this control working for my PowerPoint. Well, it's an enormous honor for me to be with these amazingly important people I admire. This panel, I really feel like I'm somewhat out of place, really, and I am really thankful, and I am extremely thankful to Penn for having published my book. To me, this is an extremely important, let's say, achievement. And as I will say, candidly, it also helps me in my work. I would say that even I tried to come to Penn in the past. I was admitted as an undergraduate to UPenn, not because I was smart, but because I played soccer, I must admit. But actually, Duke admitted me, and they also gave me a scholarship, so I had to go to Duke, and it was wonderful. But anyway, I am extremely happy to be here, and again, extremely thankful. Now, I will talk briefly about some of the ideas in my book. Practically the whole world agrees today that private property and the market are the best way to manage society's resources, not because that serves the rich, but because it's best for everyone in society. But there is a problem with market economy, and it's that it needs inequality. It requires inequality. Some people must make more money, some companies must succeed, others fail, and we don't like inequality. We don't like inequality for many reasons. Feeling inferior or excluded is an obstacle to happiness, which is the only thing that matters. Many millions, hundreds of millions, have died in wars and revolutions over the last 200 or 300 years for equality. So even if we have adopted market economy, we cannot just simply forget about the issue of equality. And the book, what I try to do is to propose that the way we make cities can be a very powerful means to construct equality. Not income equality, clearly, but a different kind of equality and an important kind of equality. I say basically that the three main kinds of equality that cities can build, one is the obvious one that is studied very often in schools of architecture and urbanism, is that rich and poor meet as equals in public spaces. Rich and poor always meet. I mean, the expensive apartment owner meets the doorman, but they meet separated by hierarchies. The interesting thing, if they meet in the park or in the sidewalk, is that they meet as equals. It's a completely different kind of relationship. In a good city, this happens very often. The other kind of equality is equality of quality of life. Beyond the obvious equalities of health or access to education or things like this, that people should have access to sports facilities, green spaces, music lessons, to have, even if regardless of income level. And the third kind of equality is what I call democratic equality. The basis, the most fundamental base of democracy is that all citizens are equal before the law. This is not just citizens are equal then. For example, a bus with 100 passengers has a right to 100 times more space in the road than a car with one. Or there is even something more powerful. If all citizens are equal, then public good prevails over private interest. And this has extremely powerful implications. Even you can use eminent domain to forcefully buy property to do parks or schools or even urban renewal. So this is the obvious equality where rich and poor meet as equals. I like to emphasize, however, that my book is not about what I did as mayor. Of course, I mention a lot of examples of what I did as mayor, but there are many things I did I do not mention, and much less I will mention here, don't worry. But it's about cities in general. And especially when I work in Africa, I really suffer because I really think they should learn from Latin America's urbanization, which is the most recent one. Not to learn all the good things we did, but rather what the things we did wrong. And so they could avoid some of the mistakes we did. And this is why, in a certain way, I wrote this book. I think it's relevant to cities and even in advanced countries in many issues. What moved me in my political career and my work as mayor was to construct equality. I propose that it is a useful criteria to analyze and to make a better city. How every policy we're going to implement, how does it impact equity, equality? Some equality can be constructed by traditional means, charging taxes to the wealthier citizens and investing those funds in making improvements to the poor people. Actually, in Bogotá, we have very high property taxes. The upper income people can pay up to the property tax of up to 2 months rental. That would be the equivalent about. So, and all of these funds are invested in lower income areas. But some equality, again, can be achieved without conflict, simply by improving the conditions of the poor, or making public spaces so wonderful that even the richest people go there and they meet as equals with the poor, such as can happen in Central Park or in other places. But rather often, constructing equality requires conflict, battles, difficult wars against powerful individuals and groups, and it has political costs. At one time in my life, I had black hair. Now, here, for example, maybe, I don't know if you can see, this is different periods. This is from Gallup poll, but I would say this is my period, my first period. And at one point, my negative image was 77%. I was public enemy number 1, positive image 18. Happily, I ended up with 70 positive, but that's another story. The second time was not so extreme in either way. In both terms as mayor, I confronted impeachment processes, not because I did any Watergate or anything like this that you may think, but simply because I was fighting, for example, to get cars off the sidewalks or things like this. And calumny and slander have made me lose many elections. Half of Colombians think that I have a baller business, and that's why I put ballers to keep cars from parking in the sidewalks, for example, or that I am an owner of shareholder of the bus system. I mean, things so calumny works in politics. Now, some of my battles that have cost me, for example, getting cars off the sidewalk, something very obvious. When the first time I became mayor in '98, there was not a single decent sidewalk, not in Bogotá, in Colombia. And of course, only about 10% of households had cars, but they were the most powerful households, and it was an extremely difficult war. Maybe one of the most difficult things any mayor in a developing city can do is to get cars off the sidewalk, something that sounds so obvious, far from obvious in the developing world. But not only that, even in advanced cities, in San Francisco, it was incredibly difficult to get parked cars out to put a BRT. Or in Jersey City, the candidate is very worried of how to do bikeways or BRT. They have to, not even cars on sidewalks, just cars which are parked on a road where it's needed for a BRT. So getting cars out of anywhere is extremely difficult politically everywhere. So this is like what we did in Bogotá, some of the most, the Carrera 15, that's the way it was when I arrived. And that's what we did. It was, and this is what we did finally. But to do this, for example, at that time, this I'm going to read to you was part of the editorial of the main newspaper on the country. At that time, newspapers were powerful. There were no. He said, the only ones who are going to benefit from these crazy big sidewalks, which they used to say, are the street children and beggars who will now have a wider sidewalk to sleep on. That's the kind of words we have. Now, I have seen many maids in American or South American suburbs. Many American suburbs don't have sidewalks. And so the maids walk in the dirt, like this one in Cape Town. But there are many in almost all American sidewalks, very similar scenes, where in the United States, mostly Latin American maids walk in this dirt next to the road in the American suburbs. This is extremely common, and everybody thinks this is normal. Now, because public good prevails over private interest, we turn the most exclusive Colombia Country Club polo fields and riding facilities into a public park. And this is not unique. President Torrijos in Panama turned a club, golf courses, into a park. But for example, Maduro, the great revolutionaries in Venezuela now, the country club in Caracas is still there, And of course, an airport for private jets and the general's jets, which are in the middle of the city, is still there now, So where are these big revolutionaries, But this is the picture chosen by Bob for my book, for the cover of my book, which is the park that we made where there used to be the polo fields of this most exclusive country club in the country. Now, clubs are especially symbolic because they are extremely classist. Because even if you have the money, you may not be able to get in. But this is not the only case. There are gated communities, or in New York, I would say 1/3 of buildings in New York are co-ops. Co-ops are clubs. Even if you have the money, you may not be allowed in. Not a very democratic system. But shopping malls are also extremely, they segregate because they are a low-income person. They are looked bad upon when they enter an expensive shopping mall, and even if they are still able to enter, they are forced out in many other ways by $10 coffees or whatever. Anyway, why are there slums everywhere in the developing world? Is everybody a thief? All governments have been thieves or stupid? Everywhere. It's impossible that everybody has been a thief or stupid everywhere. No, the problem is that private property of land does not work in the case of growing cities. Private property of land around cities. Why? Because the beauty of the market is that when prices go up, for example, in the case of tomatoes, the supply of tomatoes increases, and then the price of tomatoes goes down again. But in the case of land around growing cities, you can increase the price all you want, and the supply of land that is accessible to water, to education, to jobs, does not increase. So there is no justification whatsoever for land to be managed through the market. And many people have become rich just sitting there on their land. And we get these things like in Bogotá. I am ashamed of, but this is the kind of things that we got. And of course, we made a lot of improvements, such as fantastic schools, and we put sewage, and we put water, and we made parks, and we improved them. We legalized them all. Colombian democracy actually tolerated them. We never, they were bulldozed or anything like this. We made things like this. We made schools like this, even in community center with swimming pools, parks. We did things, and of course, but we not only legalized and improved the informal settlements, but we prevented them providing housing. How do we prevent them? Intervening. We made like an urban land reform. We forcefully bought land around the city. We bought land. If people did not want to sell, we bought them using eminent domain, and we made projects like this. We made housing projects for about 500,000 people in my 2 terms. Of course, not all of them has been built. Like you see these quality sidewalks when we made them. Some of them we just put 1 or 2 stories, and the people themselves will be 2 or 3 more stories above. They were designed for this. And this is renders because it's a project that is an ongoing project where we intervene the land. In this case, we forced landowners, more than 1,000, to pull their land into a fiduciary. Those who did not want it, we use eminent domain to put it there. It was fully designed by the city hall, and they are forced to have more than 40% of housing in low-income housing in this. This is the kind of things that can be done, but clearly private property of land does not work. And in Africa, slums are exploding at this time. There is more than 300 million people living in slums, and if nothing is done in the next 30 years, there will be more than 500 million more. Now, how public buildings can construct values. Beautiful schools in a very poor neighborhood are fantastic, and we made, in my 2 terms, made almost 70 schools. No time to go into all that, but they show that education is important. It's like the temple in the neighborhood. They show that children are important, and it's not so obvious that children are important when in low-income neighborhoods, a very important percentage don't even know who their father is. Monumental libraries in low-income areas show that we have confidence in this, the people, the residents' intelligent capacities. We show, and these happiness centers that we build also create a different kind of hero, that the young man who is, or the young woman who is an athlete or a musician is an important person. This is the kind of libraries that we built in Bogotá. We built 4 of those, and these happiness centers, 5 of these. It is during leisure time that inequality is most felt, because during sleep or during work time, the president of the company or the lowest employee are more or less equally satisfied. But this is when they go into their leisure time, the upper income person goes to a nice home, and they have access to restaurants, to vacations, to cultural activities. But the low-income people have no alternative different from their phone or the TV to public pedestrian space. That's why the very least that a democratic city should have is extremely high-quality public pedestrian space. Sidewalks at the least, parks, and of course other facilities as well, if possible as well. Beautiful public spaces make everyone happier. But for the poor, they are crucial. This is, of course, in New York, not in Bogotá, but this is the kind of things that we made more than 1,000 parks, and I probably in my 2 terms got more land for parks than all other mayors in the history of Bogotá put together, which was not very difficult because no other mayor really cared about getting land for parks. This is the kind of things that we did. Some of that was, of course, land we bought. Others were parks in theory, but they were just abandoned lots. In these very low-income, informal neighborhoods, we even bought a bunch of homes and made very high-quality small parks. This is 2 blocks from the presidential palace in Bogotá. We demolished, in this case, like 26 hectares of a horror. This is a different story. Where the police would not enter. It was completely taken by the mafia, and we did this park, among other things. Now, this is the kind of happiness centers that we built with swimming pools, blah, blah, blah. Now, wanting to improve the poor, the life of the poor, is not necessarily wanting equality. That's very different. Many rich will do anything to keep low-income citizens far from their public spaces. And very often, bogus environmental arguments are used to do this. Upper-income citizens in Bogotá, the only design criteria for parks Bogotá is very cool, by the way. So if you have shade from the trees and things becomes very cold, it's great to have a few. But if you fill up a park with trees, it gets cold, dark, dangerous, and they don't go. So we had a huge battle for something that I'll show you is almost ridiculous. This little toy park was in a very wealthy area. We were going to do just some small synthetic turf soccer field and some children game. Nobody used to go to that park before. It was the most important discussion issue in Colombia. This stupid thing, because the very powerful people there, because we did that. Now, after we did it against all their pressures, they are so happy when I am walking around there. They say, oh, thank you, we were wrong, but it was not so easy. And it's extremely difficult to do this camp. But this is not just Bogotá. Bogotá, wealthy, those who live close to the mountain, we try to do a mountain path because Bogotá is surrounded by beautiful mountains, but they are inaccessible. There is no path. It's very difficult to go. It's dangerous. So we were trying to do, but the neighbors in the buildings next to the mountain or the access path had to go. They were very bright in doing things to block the project so that no lower income people would walk by the neighborhoods to go up to the mountain. But this is not only in Colombia. In Park Slope residents, some very important people, even with the democratic links, blocked a bikeway that was going to be built through there. Even after losing a legal battle, the exclusive Greenwich community, Greenwich, Connecticut, which forced them to open up a park, a waterfront park, they made so many rules that made it almost impossible for anybody who is not from Greenwich to go to this park. So this is not just a developing country issue. Waterfronts are a magical space that are very easy to turn into areas where rich and poor meet as equals. And if public good prevails over private interest, if there is democracy, I believe public waterfronts should never be private and exclusive. They should be like this, in London, or in New York, or in Moscow, or in Zurich. Waterfronts need infrastructure for their enjoyment. Once, a couple of years ago, I was at an important university in New York, and some professors who had visited Bogotá, they said, no, we have to live in this natural, with the birds and the grass next to the river in Bogotá. And that same day, by chance, I had been at the Hudson River Park, where hundreds of thousands of people had, it's a beautiful park. But if we don't do this kind of infrastructure, hard surfaces, people cannot enjoy. So it's very nice from a fancy university there in the United States for the architecture professors say, oh, we have to leave this shrubbery, And so even if low-income people can never go, or no. But the rivers in Bogotá may be the 1/10,000 of all the riverfronts in Colombia. But they have to be used by people and by low-income people. And I think this is, again, these crazy pseudo-environmental arguments that say, no, we have 10,000 kilometers more or more, 100,000 for the birds. And here, of course, great if we get birds, but first of all, children. So the environmental arguments blocked our project of developing the land around the Bogotá River, creating an 80 miles plus waterfront park alongside Bogotá. And this, as Bogotá grows, this is going to be in the middle of the city. But then again, oh no. It cannot be touched. Now we have to be very natural and very environmental. No. So now, upper income classism is disguised as environmentalists. We tried to do a park around the people in Bogotá. We don't have regional parks. They cannot go anywhere to be in contact with nature. So we tried to do a park around here, which, by the way, belongs the land, the border, the river banks, the lake banks belong to the city. But there are some people with fancy houses, country houses around, and they were able to block a project that will have a 50-kilometer bikeway and path around the lake. So we see every time we are going to make a better city, clearly we collide with inequality. This is every time, at every turn. Wealthy owners of water-view homes were able to impede the construction of this park that would have made life happier for millions of people in Bogotá and the region. But this is not, again, just Bogotá. Long Island Sound has thousands or maybe hundreds of miles of waterfront with very fancy homes and houses in the waterfront. If we fully had democracy at work, we would have a public path and bikeway all around Long Island Sound for millions to enjoy, not for the few to have nice houses in front of the water. So we see that that principle of public good prevailing over private interest is not very much in use here either. Now, and the same with many lakes and other riverfronts, even in such a democratic country as the US. Now, there is a wonderful principle in the Scandinavia. It's called Allemansratten, the right to roam, that everybody can walk even through private property, through farms, go through even camp for 3 days without asking for permission. In Colombia, you try to do that and you get shot. But so I suspect here as well. But in many cases, even we have hedges that have planted alongside roads, so you cannot even see the scenery. Even from the road, you cannot see it because clearly public good is not prevailing over private interest. Conflict for road space is one of the most paradigmatic democratic fights of our time. How to distribute road space between pedestrians, bicyclists, public transport, and cars? A pedestrian or a bicyclist have this right to the same amount of road space as somebody in a luxury car. We did a bikeway network in 1988, before New York, Paris, or London. Not for environmental reasons, even though later I was awarded environmental prizes. We did it for equity reasons, for democratic reasons. Bikeways do not just protect cyclists, but they also show that somebody in a $100 bicycle is equally important to one in a $100,000 car. He feels very important, for example, in his bike. Now, today, we have close to 1 million bicycle daily trips in Bogotá, by far the most in any city in America. And more than 10% of non-walking trips are done by bicycle in Bogotá, despite that we have a lot of rain. So these are bikeways in Bogotá and our rainy days. Now, a project I will quickly show you, because maybe you will go work in Africa. These cities that are growing very fast. We did this fantastic 24-kilometer bicycle highway, pedestrian, whatever you want, through the areas where the city was going to grow and through some of the informal settlements. This was in the fields like this. I love this picture, I'm proud of it, but these women made underground cables, very fancy paths for pedestrians, for bicycles, and the cars in the mud. First, pedestrian. We were unconsciously building equality. This is the way it was at the end. Now, our BRT Transmilenio, again, is equality because it has exclusive lanes. We take space from higher income citizens' cars. When we did it, for the first time, public transport users travel much faster than those in expensive cars. A luxury car stuck in traffic, as a bus zooms by next to it, it's almost a picture of democracy at work. But this is extremely difficult in most societies to take space from parked cars. It's very difficult. And I like to tell you, I don't have time to go into the technical aspects, but we are moving up to 75,000 passengers our direction in this thing, which is more than almost all of the world's subways at a fraction of the cost. Now, we move 2.5 million people daily, and it's been increased by 47% at this time. But now, upper income people in developing countries ferociously demand metros. Everyone wants a metro, but they have not the slightest intention of using it. If you know, it's most likely that most Mexican people, for example, Mexico has one of the longest metro networks in a developing city. And most Mexicans that you are likely to meet perhaps are higher income, or not even, just upper middle class. Ask them, not ask them if they use the metro. Ask them if they have ever been in the metro once in their lives. It's most likely they have never been. So one of the great challenges is to get upper income people into public transport. Why do people use public transport? Some are very philosophers like the Swedes, but mostly because they have to. Because simply it's so much faster that they need to. This is our system at work, but no time to go and show it now. Now, I just finished saying something that in terms of transport, An advanced society is not the one where even the poor have cars, but rather one where even the wealthy use public transport. Democratic equality is unfinished. We have much more yet to do. We are so used to inequality that it can be in front of our noses and we don't see it, in the same way that people, even good people, saw racial discrimination and they did not think was particularly bad, or that women could not vote. And many good people thought it was normal that women should not vote, only 110 years ago or so. We see things like a bus stuck in traffic next to parked cars, and we think it's normal. Or a maid walking in a wealthy suburbs road without a sidewalk, and this is normal. Or exclusive waterfronts or urban highways. We have many cities with urban highways without public transport in them, and this is normal, just for cars. I am a staunch believer in market economy, yet my principle was always to construct equality. I just say, and this is the last image, I say inequality is the main obstacle to making better cities. A more equal society makes better cities, and a good city makes a more equal society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That really showed us a leader has vision, how that vision can be articulated in so many ways within a city or within an institution or whatever. We have now asked three of our other authors to come and work with Enrique Peñalosa in a panel to discuss their reflections on their work. And we've selected two leaders of universities, because in cities, universities are extremely important, and particularly these two universities are extremely important. Judith Rodin, the former president of the University of Pennsylvania, was very, very active in transforming this neighborhood, as many of you know, and also the university itself and how it visioned what it should be doing in the city. And Richard Freelander, also president of Northeastern University, who transformed Northeastern University and its function for the attendees and what they, urbanites, should be doing in terms of the education that would have. And we have another mayor, Mayor Manny Diaz, who took over a city in decline and transformed it dramatically into the sparkling place that it is today. I have many details on their careers, but I think it would be better to hear from them in terms of their visions, their leadership, and how what they have done tells us what you can do when you are leaders. Susan Wachter, who is co-director of Penn Institute for Urban Research, will be conducting this discussion, and I invite our speakers to come forward. Please have seats here. Oh my gosh, I apologize. I was looking at the front row. I didn't realize we had invited Eleanor, the former executive director of the city planning department here in Philadelphia, now in charge of same advisory for the city council. And we invited her because she is a leader and we expect her to be writing her book, and we'll learn something from our leaders today. Susan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel. It's so good to be here with these leaders and to be able to engage in a conversation about how they transformed their cities and their institutions. They all did. And what's particularly wonderful is they then reflected upon their transformation in books that we can all read. And I've read them before, but I reread them last night. So, University and Urban Revival, Judy Rodin. So not only do we have Judy here, but you have Judy here. And her words are so inspirational. And that's one. We also have with us Richard Freeman, Well, we also have Enrique Peñalosa's book, which you heard about. So books are so wonderful, aren't they? And because you can take them anywhere and learn from these extraordinary people who have given so much, and then on top of that, reflected about their leadership. And we have, I must say, our actually #1 book, Miami Transformed. And that's from our mayor, Manny Diaz. But all of these are leading books and have had impact, as we heard from Mary. And we have Transforming the Urban University. So it's a gift to all of us. And Penn Press is a gift. So we are so grateful to our partners. And I now have the gift of being able to ask questions of these incredible leaders. And I'm going to start with Manny Diaz. Mayor Manny Diaz transformed Miami, and it's a model of transformation. Paradise Lost was the headline on Miami Herald about Miami when Mayor took Miami, became the leader of Miami, Paradise Lost. And instead of Paradise Lost, Mayor Manny turned it around to Paradise Gained, but not Paradise Gained, as we heard so beautifully from Enrique, for the wealthy, but Paradise Gained for the citizens of Miami. And that, of course, is the purpose of a city. So, Manny, reflect upon your reflections and tell us a bit of how you did this. And also, we'll hopefully have time to come around again because I want to hear your views going forward about this moment of divisiveness. But how did you do this?
Well, first of all, let me tell you how honored I am to be part of the celebration of this institution, which is really a milestone event for an institution that is now recognized around the world, and the legacy of President Rodin, and who was fortunate enough to have two outstanding curators and stewards in Susan and Jeannie. I've served on the board for quite a number of years now, and it's been a real honor and a privilege to work with all of you on the team, including Amy, who's around here somewhere, and to be part of the distinguished group of prominent board members and to be part of this group. So just honored to be here. This book would not have happened without you and Jeannie prodding me constantly. Where's the book? Why aren't you finished? You'll, as the mayor said, you'll see some biographical parts in the book, but it's not a biography. The biography is there because I always think that it's very important for you to know the messenger before you go to the message. And Miami is not a book about Miami, because unless you care about Miami, why would you read it? But Miami is used as the vehicle for the message. You need to understand, as Susan, before really understanding the message, really understand the historical context, which Susan described. Miami had a reputation for being the capital of drugs, the capital of homicide, the capital of riots, and the capital of poverty. 2 months after I took office, the 2000 census was released, and we were the poorest large city in America, if you can believe that today. To make matters worse, during my 8 years, we went through 3 major economic happenings in our country, initially with the dot-com bust. Some of you may not be old enough to remember that, but we had a dot-com bust. And then we went to 9/11. And then, of course, we had the Great Recession. That all changed over the course of the 8 years in our city. We had the greatest economic expansion in city history. We were a top 10 job creator. Our unemployment rate when I took office was actually higher than during the Great Recession. Our Wall Street rating, which had been junk bond, became A+. 135 high-rise buildings were built in 8 years. Do the math, that's 96 months. And our tax base went up tenfold during that time. So, but at the same time, as I was doing all of this work, and we'll get into that more if you want later, I was surveying what I saw as a beginning trend in the national political landscape, and wanted to contrast it to what a city had done, and therefore Miami. How we took Paradise Lost and what had become the joke and the brunt of jokes and the laughingstock of America as an example of a city that doesn't work, and became the brand that it is today. So I wrote the book primarily raising the flags about two things. How do we get out of this Great Recession? Which, by the way, at the end, we ended up coming out stronger than we were before we entered the Great Recession. But at the same time, concerned not just about the economic relationship, but also what I saw as a growing trend in America that in some ways, as perhaps you'll hear later on if Susan gives me another shot, is very similar to what the mayor was talking about in terms of equality. And what I see in America today is specifically those flags that I raised 14 years ago when I wrote the book.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, cities are mayors and people, but they're also the institutions. And for a city to be great and to be for the citizens, the institutions must be as well. Having that happen in my lifetime in the city of Philadelphia is one of the greatest privileges of my life. And it would not have happened but for President Judy Rodin. Now, more literally, we wouldn't be here without President Judy Rodin, because as you've heard, but I will just have to reiterate, Judy Rodin asked Jeannie and myself to found and to head up this institute, which was a very brave request because such requests had failed repeatedly. And why would this one succeed? And Judy Rodin only does success. So, but it did, and it was her vision, and we are extraordinarily grateful for setting us up and for what we've been able to reach out and work with others to accomplish, including, importantly, Penn Press. So my question to Judy Rodin is, as an institution, Penn was very much not for the city, for the neighborhood. So how did Judy Rodin come to the vision that this needed to change and that it could change and that she would make it happen? So did you know it would work from day one?
Not. Let me just say, Jeannie and Susan, congratulations on amazing 20 years. I would say two things about urban universities, and particularly urban universities that have global aspirations. I don't think that you can be a great global university if you're not a good citizen of where you live. Because ultimately, the role of our kinds of institutions is to educate the citizens of the future. And we're exhorting our students all the time to engage, to participate, to contribute. If we as institutions are not role models of that same degree of engagement and contribution, you know, how can we hold our heads high and have global aspirations? And certainly becoming the mayor and truly was embarrassing economically, socially, and certainly we were very fortunate to have. Thank you. We were very fortunate to have in Mayor Rendell an extraordinary mayor, and it was great for me because Ed and I were Penn undergraduates together, and we worked in student government together. And actually, Ed's first question to me when I came back was, did I ever date you?
Did he?
So
What was the answer?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't have gone out with you. So we had a very significant friendship, but it was very clear that we were not going to get financial resources from the city. They simply didn't have it. And so, and the foundations actually had felt that they had invested significantly in the area around Penn to no avail. So we were very, very much on our own. And we realized that the strategy that we had to develop was not what we could do to the community or even what we could do for the community, but what we had to do with the community. And it was a very different way of engaging with our neighbors in West Philadelphia. And I think really, really important as you think about urban development, because it touches so much on the equity issues, the inequality issues, in every way. Eds and meds in large cities all around the world are often among the 5 largest employers in their cities. And so the economic power of an urban university can be utilized extremely effectively as a mechanism for community development if you're really thinking about it that way. So we developed a 5-pronged strategy: safety and security, not by, as we were doing, busing our students all over because it was a dangerous neighborhood, but rather renovating the neighborhood with lighting, widening sidewalks, cleaning up graffiti, streetscape, greenery, all of the things that made our neighbors really feel like we were committed again to be good neighbors. Every time that Penn did a renovation during my time as president of any building, we turned the windows back onto the street. It's a very small thing to think about, but had a really powerful both message that we're neighbors and we want you to be able to be here and look in and participate, but also it reanimated the streets with more lighting in very, very easy ways. So lots of strategies around safety and security. The second prong was really retail development. None of what you see today from 36th to 40th was there. When I came, they were derelict buildings, often boarded up, and we owned almost all of it. And so the opportunity to really transform that space became part of the strategy. But we recognized that Walnut Street was a different kind of corridor than 40th Street, and that 40th Street ought to be developed in a way that felt really community responsive and community friendly. And so we did a lot of thinking with the neighbors and the various community associations about how 40th Street would look and feel. The third prong was really about economic development of the neighborhood. And I'll give you one example, but there are hundreds in terms of how we succeeded here. We learned that all our hospitals, and at the time we owned 5 hospitals, we kind of willy-nilly send hospital laundry out to laundries all over the region, largely to southern New Jersey. And we said, why is that? You know, it's very, very regular, every day, huge amounts of laundry gets done in hospitals and doctors' offices, which we also owned. So we worked with the Wharton Entrepreneurship Center, and we worked with a couple of really entrepreneurial local small cleaners in the West Philadelphia area. And we developed what is now the largest laundry in Philadelphia, which gets all of our hospital business, but gets so much business from elsewhere. And so our strategy was develop West Philadelphia businesses, use the Wharton Entrepreneurship Program to mentor, and hire West Philadelphia First. And so we developed a Hire West Philadelphia First program that really, really had a huge impact on economic transformation. And obviously I can go into all these, the book goes into all of these. The fourth prong was housing. And here our trustees were extremely, extremely brave. They gave us $2 million to buy derelict houses in the neighborhood, rehab them, and sell them back to the neighborhood at a loss to the university. Because we didn't want gentrification. We wanted equality. We wanted people to live together and learn together and thrive together. And so we did that, and we also bought what were Section 8 apartment buildings and rented them for very, very low rents. So again, we weren't pushing the neighbors out, but we were inviting them in to be partners with us in this great transformation. And then the final thing, and what I think was the anchor to our success, we built a neighborhood public school on university property. For the first 10 years, we committed to subvening it with an extra $1,000 per pupil. And it was not a charter school. Peer universities were doing, which were faculty essentially and staff and research facilities for the faculty. It wasn't a private school. It was a neighborhood public school, and you had to move into the neighborhood in order to send your child there. And that was core and key because, and our Graduate School of Education helped develop the curriculum and run it with the Philadelphia school system in those first years. And so the bottom line message, and then everybody came, the city got engaged, and we were able to do so many things together. That development, which you see along the Schuylkill now, which is the mega Penn and Sharpe Hospital new complexes, was the old convention center site. The city transferred that to us for $1 during my presidency because they understood the economic impact that developing that site would have, as long as we remain true to buy West Philadelphia first, hire West Philadelphia first, train West Philadelphia first, which of course has been one of the keys to that property and how it's developed. So this is the key message of the book, is that you can't intervene without intervening holistically. You can't decide, oh, we're going to just do education, or we're going to just do housing, or when you're really trying to effect true transformation and where equality remains at the core of the ethos transformation, you really need to have a strategy where you're getting leverage from every intervention, and 1 + 1 = 4. It doesn't just equal 2. And so it was quite strategic, I think, Susan, in how we thought about it.
And it wasn't obvious that it was going to work. But after the fact, we look at it now and say, of course. But it wasn't only not obvious, but it wasn't easy. And although it got done, and it's extraordinary, I think besides that, it's what it has led to, people seeing what can be accomplished, what leadership can be accomplished, and being inspired. Manny Diaz and I just spoke now, Manny saying that Manny Diaz took the lessons that Judy put here with Donna Shalala in place in Miami. And Richard Freeman, we were talking a moment ago about transforming the urban university, which Penn, of course, is an exemplar of. Northeastern, when you took the reins in 1996, was looking at this question of, can it be a great university and partner with the city? And the answer wasn't at all obvious, but you had a vision. Tell us about your vision.
Is it on?
It's working.
Very different kind of. Is that working better? Yeah. Thank you. Different kind of story than the Penn story. In some ways, the mirror image of it. To put it in context, Northeastern University in Boston was historically a local institution, a commuter institution, a very, very much a resource for students from modest backgrounds in the city of Boston, a city in which many people could not afford to go to the great private universities in the city. No public higher education because Massachusetts was very slow to develop public institutions. Northeastern was the public university for Boston for most of its 100 years before I became president. What happened at a certain moment was that the state decided to invest in public higher education and built of the University of Massachusetts in Boston. And that began to drain away from Northeastern the students who historically had attended the university, because no matter how low Northeastern kept its price, it could not compete with a public institution. And so Northeastern was in serious trouble in the late 1980s and early 1990s. How do we survive in competition with a growing and high quality public urban university? And we need to change dramatically. We need to become far more selective. We need to become far more academically ambitious. We need to become more regional. We need to raise the level of our game and become a top, highly ranked, selective university. And I was brought in to make that happen. But I came to it from an urban background. When I graduated from graduate school here at the University of Pennsylvania, the burning issue of my generation was the civil rights movement, was equal opportunity for African-American people in this country. When I completed my PhD, I went to work in the Model Cities program because my goal was to use the tools that I developed to address the issues of equality and discrimination in this country. In the course of doing that work in model cities, I thought about the various institutions that can have an effect on urban life, and quickly concluded that the institutional, if you think of hospitals and philanthropic institutions and business institutions and schools and police departments and all the other institutions that affect urban life, the one closest to my own heart was the university. So my thought was, how can I become a leader of an urban university and use the resources of that institution to advance the goals of urban equality? And Northeastern gave me that opportunity, but it was a paradoxical situation, because on the one hand, in order to make Northeastern more competitive and allow it to survive, Northeastern needed to, in some ways, move away from its traditional roots in the city. We needed to become more regional, more national. We needed to become more selective. We needed to become more academically ambitious. So the story in my book is on the one hand, transforming Northeastern in terms of its academic status. It's now a top 50 national university in the rankings. It was about 162nd when I became president. So one part of the story is, how did we do that? That's not particularly relevant today or particularly interesting today. The question was, how could we be faithful to our urban roots while doing that? And so the story is a story of how you manage admissions policies, how you manage academic program policies, how you manage physical development policies, and how you manage the overall resources of the institution to strengthen the city at the same time that you're becoming a more highly ranked selective university. My goal for Northeastern was I wanted us to be the institution in Boston that was most oriented towards strengthening the city, while we were also advancing our own interests. So, not to go into too much detail, but on the side of the academic program, the notion was to make our urban setting central to the academic experience of our students, both through the formal curriculum and through things they did outside the curriculum. And developing our research programs, we of course wanted to achieve excellence as a research university, but the question was, what kind of research do we do? I was very informed by the William Rainey Harper at the University of Chicago in the late 19th, early 20th century, where he was building the great social science departments at the University of Chicago, but they were doing it through doing research in the city. Faculty members at the University of Chicago were on the school board. They were on the city planning commission. They were on the public health agency. He wanted that. We wanted the same kind of thing for our faculty members. So urban research, policy research, research that moved the city forward towards its goals. In terms of facilities, we had to become a residential university. So we built a lot of dormitories, but as we did so, very much encouraged by a mayor who would not have let it happen any other way, there was always a community benefit to our physical development programs. We built low-income public housing, for example, for the city of Boston in exchange for having land on which we could build dormitories. When we designed the facilities, they were designed to welcome the city. So there were no gates. There were no, you go to Harvard, you have to go through a gate. Harvard is surrounded by a fence. We said there'll be no fence. There'll be open archways. We're going to welcome the city. We'll invite these students in the public schools to use our library. Let the community use our physical, our gym. So facilities became another vehicle for how we could relate to the city. We tried to orient our business operations, our purchasing operations, our hiring operations, to helping the community, hire community residents to do various kinds of jobs, hire contractors from the community to provide services like renovating facilities or policing our grounds, those kinds of things. Build a relationship with the public schools, give more scholarships to Boston public school kids. So one of the biggest challenges was an admissions policy. An urban university typically was a university that served local kids. We had to move away from that, but we didn't want to move too far away from it. So we built a partnership with the Boston Public Schools. We wanted to be the #1 institution in Boston to provide scholarships to Boston Public School kids. During my presidency, we got to a number of 50 full tuition scholarships for graduates of the Boston Public Schools, but we wanted our faculty in the public schools too, working with the faculty, summer training programs for high school faculty members, elementary school programs to strengthen their professional skills. So a lot of different dimensions to it, Susan, but the message of what I learned from Judith Rodin was you could be a world-class university and also be in an urban university. That was an insight that Judy gave to our industry, because I think you really invented that idea, and it was your experience that convinced me that was a viable strategy for Northeastern. So I'm very happy to be here to have a chance to tell the story, have a chance to congratulate and thank Judy Rodin and also Susan and Eugenie for your support, and in absentia Peter Agree, who was a great editor of my book as well. So I want to share in the congratulations to everybody celebrating this and say how pleased I am to be here.
Thank you for your good work and your good book. And I'm going to now turn to our two panelists to comment, and Eleanor and Enrique, on the importance of, and even, is it possible to have excellence and partnership and give back and raise up the community, and if I may say so, achieve equality, as Enrique has called us to do. So Eleanor, give us your thoughts on these big questions. You're there.
Wow, big questions.
You know whether it works or not. Tell us.
So first of all, thank you for having me. I feel like I'm in rarefied air and I got the memo. I've got to write a book very soon.
Yes, you do.
It was? Okay. As the former planning director for the city of Philadelphia, I have a history of working with the city for the past 10 years. And it's interesting that you said Miami is the largest, poorest city, because Philadelphia, I think, holds that title right now, which is unfortunate. And there's challenges with equality, left, right, and center. I can speak from my experience as a practitioner of urban planning that And this came to fruition after 2020 when we got locked down during COVID and after George Floyd's murder. Oh, and by the way, I'm sitting next to, you don't know this, but as a grad student, I inhaled your book and even wrote a toolkit based on it for anchor institutions and how to do what you profited. So I'm very excited to be here. But even as a profession, it lacks equality in the way it conducts itself. Planners do. And so that was very interesting perspective to look inside and look at ourselves and how we sustain the industries and the systems that were set up that weren't based in equality, and how to unpack those and reestablish, restart, and redo it again. And that was also inspired by another writer, Rothstein's book, The Color of Law, very educational. As a planning student, I also graduated from Penn, and we did not have that at the time, but that was very eye-opening that these structures were built into the federal government, the state government, local government, and as a leader of local government, I was very, and as a person of color, I was very cognizant of what perpetuations of inequality through the profession that I would or could be doing consciously or unconsciously, and took a look with a group of planning directors called the Big City Planning Directors from across the nation, the 30 largest cities who we meet regularly, to really ask yourself, as this time passed, what will history show that planners did about this? And so we really unpacked, like, where are the places that those systemic changes are causing harm, and not just to focus on that and to point fingers and to cause blame, but to say, well, then how do we rectify this? How do we turn this ship around? And we spent a lot of time on that and issued a call to other planning directors, and a lot of them did respond to the call. Because one thing I do know and have learned, and this is from the planning director in Toronto, and she said, when it comes to inequality, the systems as they are will continue to have the outcomes that they do if we don't intentionally make those changes. And therefore, it's one thing to just say, well, this is how it is, but unless we, this keeps going in and out, unless we make direct and conscious attempts to make the changes, then things will remain the same and the results will continue to be the same. So I'm also in rarefied company with this man here who's also an inspiration. We've sat on panels before, that some of the changes can be so basic, but so transformative. A sidewalk, it's just a sidewalk. It's not a big building, it's a sidewalk. It's a great equalizer. And where are those opportunities within our cities to make those things happen? And having the politicians that are brave enough to do that, because that is part of the challenge. The political environment is so fraught that people are afraid to act on common sense, right? They're acting for political gain. So, yeah, that's my sort
Thank
of
you so much.
thoughts
I'm
about it all.
theme and ask the mayor to comment on divisiveness in a moment. But first, I want to hear Enrique's views of what you've heard here. And does it hearten you? Does it make you feel as that we just have so much more to do? Tell us what you think.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I took note. I am good friends with the president of the main university, or the best university in Colombia, which is the University of Los Andes. And I was just taking notes because I think some of the things that you did, and I bought your books, and I will give one to her. And I believe this is very fascinating, which how much can a university improve its surroundings. And the case in Bogotá is very similar in many ways, because some of the best universities, this one in particular, and others, are located in a very deteriorated downtown. And so the potential is great, But in general, many people there are not, they are poor, but it's not like they have gone into crime thing. They're just poor. So they're not the drug addicts or things like this. Simply, we had some areas where there were a huge drug addiction. But anyway, to me, I see that's a great potential, all the things that were done by you. I believe that a city is a means to a way of life, and that people do behave in a different way according to the way the city is. And there are some things that you do. For example, we did the most alternative youth were the skaters. Skaters who used to have supposedly were drug addicts and tattooed and earrings and nose and whatever. And of course, they were the biggest haters of Mayor Peñalosa, of course. But we made like 12 super skate parks. And in places where people would see them, so that because they are youngsters that are very athletic very often, but they don't like to be in teams, they don't like rules, they like to be by themselves. And so we wanted them to feel that they were part of the city, and they were important to the city, and they were important. And amazingly, in a couple of those places, they were the first to help denounce some of the drug dealers who were in the area, and in very discreet and secret way told us who they were, and by their own initiative to tell us to go and get rid of them. So I agree that many of these wonderful things that are done are possible. They are not always successful. I mean, many times we do things that don't really work as we wish, but more often than not, they do.
Mayor, thank you so much. And I could listen to you all day, but we do have the book that we could read and reread. And I do want to end going back to Mayor Manny Diaz and ask him to reflect on Mayor Bloomberg says in the introduction to your book that you both, he and you, were able to accomplish things in part because previously to becoming mayors, you were independents. And he said in the introduction, because partisanship often stands in the way of getting progress, of getting things done, of progress. So today is a time of great divisiveness. So can you comment on divisiveness and the opposite is coming together and what we need to make progress?
Also, he has a bunch more zeros after his name than I do. Well, I sort of left you hanging at the end. I kept my intro short, but I want to go back to that point and what are those signs that I started seeing 14 years ago? And for that, I think the best illustration, and everything else will follow, and so much of what we've discussed here is about equality, and which means fundamentally, when you say that, you're saying people matter because you're thinking about people. You're thinking about equally sharing the benefits of society and the public realm and other conversations with people. So that's the basic premise. So, you know, one example that I like to give is we were standing outside my office. At the time, I was running the Florida Democratic Party, and as typically happens, the cleaning crew that comes after work was leaving the building. And I was surrounded by a number of staff people. And as this elderly couple were leaving the building through the parking lot to go get their car, I asked everyone around me, I said, "What do you see?" And I got all kinds of answers. Well, that's the cleaning crew and blah, blah, blah. And I see that they're wearing this color or that, you know, outfit or whatever. I said, "No, I see my parents." And that couple that you're looking at today, by the way, probably this is probably their second job. And they're here to do another job. And why do I think of my parents? Because when I got here as a young immigrant kid, my parents did that. They worked 3 jobs, they cleaned offices, they cleaned dishes, they parked cars and did whatever they had to do to create hope, to create opportunity, to create a shot at the American dream for me, as many immigrant families have done before me and continue to do. As a matter of fact, I never knew growing up that I was actually poor. What I don't see in that couple is a statistic, a number, and identity. I see America. And by the way, that is not today's America. And I'm glad you used examples of America to point out the lack of equality in some of the projects you mentioned. And that is also not something that I think either side of the aisle, quite frankly, escapes any kind of blame for. So instead, what did I start to see? The hyperpartisanship, where I see people more interested in being ideologues than idealists. A tremendous amount of identity politics, wherein, by the way, it's the people that lose when we fight the wrong battles. It's that 60-year-old Manny Diaz, who would not benefit today from the kinds of discussions and our arguments that we're having. I see globalization and the effect that it's had on working class Americans, which have left behind, many significant numbers have been left behind, lost the dream and lost the hope. I see the amount of money that we have in politics today, the technology, the algorithms. People don't get to shake the hands of a politician anymore in America. People do not get to look in the eye of a candidate anymore. All of that is lost in America. An information age which has flattened the world, which has become virtual and digital communication. We no longer talk to people. We no longer talk to each other. And most often these days, when we do, we speak in a language that no one really understands. Gerrymandering continues to be a problem, which allows politicians to govern for the next election, not for the next generation. The impact of social media, the impact of the 24/7 news cycle. We've stopped in America, we have stopped investing in people and in places. And as a result, people have lost hope. There was a poll that I saw recently of 2/3 of America's middle class today feels that their lives will not change from this day to the day they die. That is loss of hope, and that is a really bad sign for a country. And what has that all created? I don't need to tell you this. We lack trust in government, but who is government? Government is us. So if we lose trust in government, we've lost trust in ourselves and in our institutions. And in the book, I argued that to rebuild America, we have to rebuild it at the level of cities and make investments in people, like the mayor said, because cities are the political unit closest to people. And by the way, it also happens to be the political unit most trusted by people. Government has a role to create, through the investments that the mayor was talking about, to give hope, opportunity, and a chance at a better way of life. Miami and cities like all cities can control their future, can control their destiny by building community and reconnecting neighbors. And mayors are the architects of that future. Miami wasn't afraid to dream big dreams, because in Miami, our people mattered. And in Bogotá, people mattered. It's a lesson that worked in Miami and worked and can work for our nation. My conclusion is, and I mentioned this to Susan, when they were pushing me to finish the book, I had an assistant who worked for me in the mayor's office who said to me, I'm a little worried because we're taking too long, and I'm not sure this is the theme of this book, the message of this book is going to continue to be relevant by the time it's published. And I said, you know what? Trust me, this trend is only going to get worse. Well, here we are today.
Well, with that, we look to you, our audience, to carry the promise forward. And right now, please, to thank all these wonderful panelists.